Alright, so this was your homework assignment for last week. It deals with traversing arrays forwards and backwards. So I provided you with a little bit of starter code that basically created a scanner object called console that would take user input to first create an array of a size declared by the user after they respond to the first question, how many numbers will you enter? That number is stored into an integer named count, which is then used to create an array that has a length of count, which is here on line 17. After that, the starter code continues in a for loop that iterates from 0, meaning the starting index of the array, up to but not including its length. So this for loop is going to iterate through the entire array in order to store user-specified values into each position. So basically this is going to loop as long as the array is. So let's say that the user specified 4 for how many numbers they would enter. It would create an array with a length of 4, so index values 0 through 3. And this loop would iterate through index values 0 through 3, prompting the user to type in a number. And so each time the user types in a number, it gets stored at that index position and then prompts for another number until the entire array is filled. Your job was to then traverse that already populated array in forwards order and in backwards order. So the first loop is to go in forwards order using the new enhance loop that we just learned. And then the reason why we wanted to iterate through that in forwards order was to show that we could print out in forwards order through that array. After we completed that step, step 1, your next task was to use a regular for loop, an index for loop, to traverse the array from the end back to the beginning, so in backwards order. And to show that we were doing that correctly, we were going to print out the numbers in the array in backwards order. So a lot of time, this doesn't have a huge amount of utility, just printing out things in the array, but print statements are a really good way of showing exactly what your code is doing. So print statements are often used when you're trying to debug to kind of see what the values are at a certain part of the program. Alright, so let's start with step 1, which is to use an enhanced for loop that's going to traverse the entire array in forward order. So first of all, we need a few pieces of information here. We need to know where we want to start and where we need to end. And we also need to know the name of the array that we are referencing. So in an enhanced for loop, we actually don't need to specify exactly where we need to start and end because it's just going to go through the entire array. But what we do need is we need the name of the array and what kind of stuff it has inside of it. So if we look at line 17, we can see that the name is number array and it stores integers. Okay, so for enhanced for loop, we're going to start with the keyword for. And in the parentheses, we need to declare what type of stuff we're searching for in that array. So we know that this array is storing integers. So we're going to go ahead and declare kind of like a temporary variable to hold each element in the array as we traverse it. So a good convention is to kind of use something that represents what that variable is. So a number array holds numbers. So let's say for int number. And then instead of the keyword in, like some programming languages have, like Python, Java just uses a colon, and that represents in. And then we need to name what array we're searching in, which is number array. So in regular English, this is saying for each number in number array, we're going to do something. So this automatically, without specifying the indices we want to look at from 0 to the length, for instance, it just goes ahead and visits each position of the array. So all we needed to do is to prove that we were doing this correctly. We just wanted to print out the elements and check ourselves. So we're just going to do a basic system out.print. I'm going to do a print line so that they're on separate lines, just like the example. And each time I want to print out the number that is in this temporary variable called number. So I'm just going to put the variable name there. All right, so at this point we can actually just test out our code because down here we haven't implemented anything and it should still run. So I'm just going to go ahead and click run. It's going to start prompting me. How many numbers will I enter? I'm going to go ahead and put 4, and I'm going to use the example numbers here on the right hand side. So I'm going to put 12, 8, -2, 39. And there are my numbers printed in forward order, so in the exact same order that they were stored in the array. Okay, so it's very important to notice that I could use an enhanced loop in this instance because we're not skipping any part of the array, we're not starting anywhere out of the ordinary, we're starting at the beginning and we're going to the very end, and also we're not having to reference the index to update the array or anything to transform it. So it's perfectly fine to use an enhanced loop here. And the reasoning is the syntax is just much easier. So the next one, since we are starting at the last element and progressing to the left to the beginning, we cannot use an enhanced for loop because the enhanced for loop starts at the beginning, goes to the end. So we need to use an indexed for loop. And for this one, we do need to know where we start and where we're going to end. So the place that we're going to start is actually not the beginning, it's the end. And, well, we don't want to hard code the end. We don't want to hard code an index value to start at because we want to be able to use this for any array that a user could possibly specify for all different lengths. So we're going to use the variable length that is part of the array class. So we're going to start at the length -1 because remember that the index values start at 0, so the ending element is always going to be equivalent to the array's length -1. So here we've got an array of length 4, but the last element is located at index 3. So we're going to start at, and again, I want to stress that this first component where I declare an int called I or index, the variable name is arbitrary. There's nothing, you could call it X, you could call it something like a keyboard mash. It really doesn't matter as long as you're consistent and consistently refer back to that variable when you need to. So I like to use index because it makes sense. It's tracking the index. A lot of times you'll see I, just for brevity's sake in the textbook as well as in the AP test. So again, we're going to start at the ending element, which is going to be number array dot length -1. And we want to go all the way up to 0, and we want to go one by one. So we want to make sure that our index is always going to be greater than or equal to 0. This means that as soon as we hit a negative number, we don't want to be in this for loop anymore because we don't want to go out of bounds. And since we're moving to the left from the end to the beginning, we're going to be decrementing index each iteration. All right, so now we need to actually print out each element at the respective index. So we're going to do another system.out print line, and we're going to reference the array, number array. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't numbers array. And we're going to use subnotation to specify the index, which is represented by the variable index that is updating on each iteration of this for loop. So the first time we should be grabbing the last element, then we'll be decrementing to the second to last, and so on until we get to the 0th element. So now we can go ahead and run this. I'm going to use the same values as last time, as pictured in this illustration. So 12, 8, -2, 39. And now you see our beginning for loop that looped through in forward order still works, and now we see the backward order for loop does as it was expected. So I hope that you found this helpful. Watch this video as many times as you need to really understand what's happening.